Hi everyone, it's Lisa Mears. Thank you for joining me. In my video today, I'm going to be making 6 cards with a brand new collection from Spellbinders. This is called the Warm Wishes Camper Collection. And there are a few different products in this collection that I'll be using to make my cards today. And one of the products is shown here. This is the Camper Life die set. And this die set contains all of the dies that you see here to make a fun camper for your cards. And there are also some other dies like this one here, which makes a coffee mug that you can put the text warm wishes inside. There's also some dies that say happy holidays, and then this one here says Merry Christmas. And there is also a wreath die. And then there's also some other dies that allow you to put this camper together, such as the doors, the windows, and the wheels. So you can decorate this camper for Christmas, but you don't have to. You can also decorate it for other occasions, and that's where this die set comes in. This is called the Sweet and Savory dies, and there are dies for a hot dog, a pretzel. There's also a die to make a donut. There's a die to make a slice of pizza. And finally, there's a die that you can make a ramen bowl, and there are chopsticks to go with it. And these dies, once you put them all together, you can use these standalone on a card, or you can use these to coordinate with your camper. I also have a stamp set that coordinates with this set. This is called the Sweet and Savory Sentiments Clear Stamp. So you can see there's some happy birthday, thank you, and then there are some fun pun sentiments that go along with those sweet and savory dies, such as hot dog, it's your birthday, congrats on tying the knot with knot K-N-O-T. I cannot thank you enough. Frankly, you're the best. I'm sorry I was salty. All you need is love, with need spelled K-N-E-A-D, and there are so many more fun sentiments on this stamp set. For my cards today, the papers that I'll be using are from scrapbook.com, some of their solid and pattern paper pads. And I will have links to all of the products that I use in my video down in the description box below. So if you're interested in purchasing any of these products, please check that description box below for those links. So I'm going to start out by showing you how I made my camper, and I'm using the peppermint solid color cardstock. I just did a flip through there so you can see the different colors, and I'm going to use the red paper for the actual body of the camper, and I like to ink up the edges, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now to add some ink around the edges just to add some more definition. And the ink that I'm using is the Festive Berries Distress Oxide ink. And then I went ahead and die cut some of the dies here to put this camper together, and now I'm going to work on the door. So I'm showing you the dies there on the screen, and I've already did my die cutting. So I have a piece of greenish teal cardstock, and I did put some more ink around those edges. I'm going to add that. It's like a window to the door. So the base of the door is actually out of just solid white cardstock. And then I have a piece of gray cardstock that I'm going to just add as another layer right over top of that window. And I did ink up the edges of that gray cardstock as well, and I used the Hickory Smoke Distress Oxide ink. And now I'm going to use this die, and that little piece that I showed you there is for the doorknob. So I die cut the doorknob, and I'm going to add it to my door. So this door consists of these 4 pieces of cardstock, 4 dies, and I'm just adding some Hickory Smoke ink, which is the gray ink, to the edges of the door just to add some more definition, and then I will attach that door to the camper base. And by the way, that doorknob, in case you can't tell, I did die cut it with some gold mirror cardstock from Spellbinders because my camper is going to have some gold accents. So I went ahead and die cut a accent piece for the top of the camper, the middle of the camper, and I'm going to go ahead and glue those down. And I did ink up the edges of that green cardstock with the Pine Needles Distress Oxide ink. And I'm going to go ahead and add glue to the back and add the larger die cut piece along the middle, and then the thinner piece along the top of the camper. And then I have this little piece that is going to be for the tail light, and I'm just going to add that underneath. Next, I'm going to work on the window. So using the two rectangular dies that you see there on the table, I die cut a piece of white cardstock out of the larger one, gray cardstock out of the smaller one, and I'm just layering those onto each other and then adding them to my camper. Using the dies that you see here on the screen, I die cut out of some of the green cardstock as well as some gold mirror cardstock. Again, adding some ink for more definition. So just showing you here the pieces that I've die cut out of the dies. And these pieces are going to be for the bottom of the camper. So this little gold piece I'm going to add to the top of this green piece. That's going to actually stick out from the bottom left side of the camper. This is the bumper for the camper, and then I'm going to add that to the bottom left, and then I'm going to add this thin green strip underneath the door. Next, I'm going to use the awning die and die cut a piece of white cardstock. And that die will actually put two score lines in the cardstock. So I'm just going to fold the cardstock at those score lines and just use my bone folder to smooth that down. So one at the top and one at the bottom where the scallops are. And then I'm going to take this particular die and die cut some blue cardstock. This is some navy blue cardstock, and it gives me all these little pieces. And I'm going to add these to the awning. I'm taking the larger rectangle die cut and adding it flush against the edge of the awning, and then adding the smaller piece with the round edge right underneath it. And I'm going to skip every other scallop and add the blue die cut pieces. So you can see that between all of the blue pieces, all of that white cardstock shows through, so it's going to look like it's blue and white striped. And the neat thing about this awning is because it has those score lines, now when you add it to the camper, it's going to look like it's dimensional because it's actually going to pop out. So you can see that I just stuck the top of that awning where the top score lines are. I stuck it in the slit in the camper, and it fits in there perfectly, and you can see the back side of that awning on the back of that camper. And I'm just going to add glue underneath that flap and then just press it down along the back side of the camper to hold that in place. So when I turn this over, now you can see the dimensional look of the camper. Okay, so this particular die, I die cut some of these strips out of some gold mirror cardstock. These are going to be some accent pieces on my camper. So this longer piece is going to be an accent piece underneath my window, kind of like the windowsill. And then this smaller strip is going to be an accent piece above the door. And next I'm going to work on the tire. So I have the dies there on the table showing what I used for the cardstock pieces for the tire. I have the large one cut out of black, and then the mid-size one cut out of some white cardstock. I did ink up the edges of the white cardstock with some gray ink, and then I added a piece of gold cardstock to the top. So the smaller circle is in gold, and then I'm going to just put glue there on the top of the tire, and I'm going to add it to the back of the camper. So I'm just going to press that down really well. I'm actually going to take some double-sided tape, and I'm just going to hold this in place with some double-sided tape. Next, I used this die to die cut a piece of gold cardstock. This is the hitch of the camper. And then I have this little piece. I also die cut some gold cardstock. I'm going to go ahead and add some glue to the top of this hitch, but this piece that I added glue to is going to be glued behind the camper. So you can see how the hitch will actually stick out, and that little piece is actually glued behind. But I'm going to add a little piece of tape to the back just to make sure it stays in place while my glue dries. Okay, and then this little piece I'm going to add glue to, and I'm going to add this to the top of the camper. Add that there, and then I'm going to work on the wreath. So my wreath is going to be pink. I chose to use pink because I'm going to add it to the door, and I didn't want to make it green because I have some green cardstock already on the door, and if I added green, I didn't think it would show up as well. So we're going with a pink wreath. I added some of the picked raspberry ink around the edges of the wreath just for some extra definition. And here I'm just adding a red bow to the bottom of that wreath. And I'm going to go ahead and add that to the door. Next, I'm going to work on the coffee mug. So you can choose to have a sentiment inside the coffee mug, and the sentiment says warm wishes. So I just dropped that sentiment piece inside of the mug die, and I'm going to add some tape just to keep it together and die cut it out of some navy blue cardstock. If you don't want the warm wishes in your mug, of course you don't have to use that die, and then your coffee mug would just be solid blue. I did die cut that same die out of some white cardstock, and I'm just going to layer my coffee mug onto the white cardstock, and you can see that the white cardstock actually shows through. I end up changing this a little bit later. I actually end up making those letters gold. So if you wanted to make your letters gold, you can just take that coffee mug die and just die cut it out of some gold cardstock and then back it up again. But you'll see how I fix this a little bit later. And then all of these other little pieces I'm going to decorate for my coffee mug. So I have the actual coffee, that is that oval piece, and that was die cut out of some brown cardstock. And then the piece that I'm working on right now is going to resemble a candy cane. So the actual stick part of that I die cut out of some red cardstock, and then I have all these little white pieces that is going to be the swirl and the candy cane, and I'm just adding those onto the red stick. And these are pretty fine pieces, so I am using some tweezers just to grab a hold of them so that I have better control. And then this candy cane will fit inside of the coffee. There's actually a slit inside the coffee where your candy cane can actually poke through. And then these particular dies are for the steam. There's a larger one and a smaller one, and I'm also going to poke those through the slits in the coffee as well. I did ink up the edges of the white cardstock for the steam with some of the hickory smoke ink, which is the gray ink, just to add some definition to that steam. So you can see on the back side here of that coffee layer, you can see everything that's poked through those slits. I have the candy cane and the steam, and I'm just putting a little tiny piece of tape on the back just to hold that steam in place. And then I'll remove that tape and then just add some glue and add that directly to the top of that coffee mug. Look how cute that is. Warm wishes. And you can actually use that die cut piece on any card. It doesn't have to be with this camper. Okay, so that little piece that I just showed you, I die cut out of some gold mirror cardstock. That is the little stand for the top of the camper. So I'm adding that to the top of my camper, trying to make sure that I can get it straight. I do end up putting some double-sided tape on the back side of this just to keep this down while the glue dries. And then the Warm Wishes coffee mug is going to be right on top of that. So it's going to look like this camper is carrying that large mug of coffee. So I'm going to go ahead and put glue at the top of the stand and then put the Warm Wishes coffee mug right on top. So now that my camper is put together, I'm ready to work on the background for my card. And I want to create a snowflake background. So I'm using a large slimline snowflake stamp set from scrapbook.com, and I'm inking it up with some gold ink. And because this stamp set is so large, I am using my Sizzix stamp and stencil tool in order to stamp this down because it gives me plenty of room on the left and right sides of this to stamp it down. And this white cardstock is measured at 4 3/4 by 6 3/4 because I am going to be making a 5x7 card. So I need to stamp down the stamp at the bottom part of this cardstock as well. So I just tried to line it up the best I could. It's not going to line up perfectly because I'm using a stamp that is meant for a slimline card and not a 5x7 card. So again, those snowflakes are not going to line up perfectly, but it's not going to be a big deal because I'll be able to cover it up with my camper, and you'll see what I'm talking about here in just a little bit. This collection also has a blizzard stencil, which is a stencil full of snowflakes, which measures 8.5 by 11 inches, which I don't have. However, I will link it below in case you are interested. So next I took this particular die and die cut a piece of white cardstock to give me a little snowy edge border, and that's going to represent snow at the bottom of my card. And there are two additional sentiment dies, one that says Merry Christmas and one that says Happy Holidays. And if you drop those word dies into the large rectangle, you'll be able to die cut the rectangle out with the sentiment, just like I did with the Happy Holidays sentiment. But instead, I'm going to take one of the dies, and without using the actual rectangle die to insert it, I'm just putting the words Merry Christmas over top of my snowy hill, centering it, and then running that through the die cut machine, and then that will die cut the words out of the snow. So it actually will die cut all of those little letters, so if you wanted to save those letters for another project, you can do that, but I'm not going to. But what I am going to do is die cut a piece of gold mirror cardstock from the rectangle die and then put it on the back of that snowy hill. So I'm just lining it up with the words Merry Christmas on the back and then just adding some double-sided adhesive tape to that gold mirror cardstock to keep it attached to that snowy hill. And then I'll remove the backing from that tape. And then I'm going to go ahead and add some glue to the rest of that snowy hill. And I'm going to add that to my card. And when you see it on the front side, you can see how pretty that looks with the gold mirror cardstock shining through the words Merry Christmas. So next I'm going to remove the double-sided adhesive tape from the back of the camper, add glue to the back, and then I'll add that to my card. And because I used the gold mirror cardstock on the words Merry Christmas, I thought I should go ahead and add some of the gold mirror cardstock to the warm wishes just for consistency. So I took the warm wishes die and just die cut it from the gold mirror cardstock, and I'm just adding the letters to the coffee mug. And by the way, I did have double-sided adhesive tape on the back of the gold mirror cardstock before running it through my die cut machine, so all of those letters are now a sticker and I don't have to worry about putting glue on the back of those tiny letters. Okay, so now I'm going to add that entire layer to a piece of red cardstock. My red cardstock measures 4 7/8 by 6 7/8, and then that's going to go on a 5 by 7 white card base. So here is my completed card using the camper with the Warm Wishes coffee cup. I just love how this turned out. So now I want to show you how you can use this camper die to make cards for all occasions, and that's with using the additional Sweet and Savory die set. So remember, this die set has dies that you can use to make a pizza, a hot dog, a ramen bowl, a donut, and a pretzel. And all of these are large dies that you can put on top of your camper. So instead of putting the Warm Wishes with the coffee mug, instead you would put, for example, the pizza up there. And the pizza is what I'm working on right now. So I went ahead and die cut all of the dies for my pizza. I did add ink to the edges just for some extra definition. So here I'm adding the cheese layer on top of the tomato base, and here I'm adding the crust to my pizza. There's also some dies for pepperoni, and these little pepperoni dies have holes in them, so if they don't all cut out, you can just use a poker tool and just poke the rest of those cardstock pieces out of those holes. So I'm adding a few pieces of pepperoni, and then there are also some dies for peppers. So here is the die for that. I die cut it out of some green cardstock. There's also a die for olives, which I die cut out of some black cardstock. And then I'm just going to glue all of those pieces onto my pizza. And I'm just overlapping those dies because just like with a pizza, all of the toppings are usually overlapped on top of the pizza slice. So I'm adding some of the green peppers to the top of the pepperoni and then adding some of the olives on top as well. And you can add as many or as little as you want to your pizza slice. So here's an up close look at my final pizza. Look how cute that is. I just love that. So here's a look at the pretzel. The pretzel is probably the quickest one to put together. I just die cut some light brown cardstock and I'm adding some of the walnut stain distress ink to the edges just to add some definition to it. And here's what it looks like. I'm just going to put it against a white piece of cardstock. So there's my pretzel. And then I also have the ramen bowl. You can see there on the table all of the dies that I've used to die cut the pieces for the ramen bowl. So the actual bowl itself is with some orange cardstock. And then there's this little orange accent piece for the bowl. And then I also have a piece of black cardstock that I die cut the rim of the bowl out of. So I'm going to go ahead and put glue on the back of that. And I'm going to add that to the orange bowl. So this just adds some definition to this bowl. So you can see it taking its shape. And then I'm going to add this accent piece to the side of the bowl. And now I'll work on the inside of the bowl. So I have this piece cut out of the yellow cardstocks or the noodles, which I'll go ahead and add to the bowl. I also have the chopsticks, which I die cut out of some black cardstock, and that die also has some of the ramen with it. So I die cut the die again out of some of the same yellow cardstock that I did for the ramen on the inside of the bowl, and I'm adding these ramen noodles to the chopstick. So it's going to look like you're picking up the ramen with the chopstick, so the ramen is on the edge of it. And then I'm just adding some of the accent pieces to the chopstick out of some orange cardstock. And this particular die here is for an egg, and I went ahead and die cut the white of the egg. I'm going to add that, and then the yolk of the egg will be added right on top. I die cut a piece of lettuce out of some green cardstock. I'm going to just cut that down a little bit and add it to my ramen bowl. And then I'm going to add the rest of the topping here to the top of the ramen bowl. And here is the completed bowl. So moving on, I'm going to work on the donut. So I have some of the brown cardstock and pink cardstock, and I am inking up the edges. The donut does not have that many dies to go with it. It really just has the donut base and then the topping and then a die for sprinkles. So I have the cake part of the donut in the brown cardstock and then the topping out of the pink cardstock, and then this die is for the sprinkles. So I'll go ahead and glue the topping to the cake part of the donut. And then for the sprinkles, I'm not going to use the die that came with my die set. Instead, I'm going to use an embellishment mix from Trinity Stamps, and I'm going to glue all of these little sprinkles on top of my donut. I just wanted it to look more realistic. I think it will add an extra special touch to the donut. So I'm just going to add a little drop of glue on the donut, and then I'm going to add the sprinkle right on top. And here is a look at the completed donut. Isn't that cute? I love that. Okay, so here's the hot dog. Went ahead and laid out all of the dies so that you can see all of the dies included for the hot dog. Here is the hot dog bun. I'm just adding some of the brown ink to the edges, and this small thin piece will go at the bottom of the hot dog bun just as an accent. So I'll go ahead and glue that on. I also have the actual hot dog that is going to be glued behind the bun, and then there are all these dies for ketchup and mustard. The green is the relish, which I actually use that as lettuce for the ramen bowl. So here you see me just adding some glue to the back of the hot dog bun and then adding the mustard strip to the back. Once I added the mustard, I'm going to add another little strip of glue to the back of that hot dog bun, and I'm going to add the ketchup, and then I'm going to add the relish. So one on the left side, and then I'll add one on the right side as well. And the last thing is to add the actual hot dog. So that's going to be added in the back of all of those condiments. And here is the completed hot dog. So now I'm ready to work on my cards. So for this card, I have a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock cut down to 4 1/8 by 5 3/8, and I'm taking a piece of the scrapbook.com mint tape and using it as a mask, and I'm just going to put it along the lower portion of that cardstock so that about 1 inch of cardstock can be seen below the tape. And I'm using the Mode Lawn Distress Oxide ink to ink up the bottom of the cardstock because this is going to represent grass on my scene. Next, I'm going to pull up that mint tape and I'm going to just cover up the ink that I just inked down on the cardstock, so all of the green ink will be covered. And now I'm creating my sky, and this is going to be inked with the Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink, and I'm just going to put that all over the white area of that card front. Once I finish inking up the background, I'll remove the mint tape, and you can see the sky and the grass. I went ahead and put my camper together off screen using the same colors that are in the hot dog. Next, I'm going to take this strip of cardstock and just cut another piece out, and I'm going to add a sentiment to it. So I'm just going to add it here to my Misty and go to my Sweet and Savory sentiment stamp, and I'm going to line up the sentiment on this piece of cardstock. My sentiment says, "Hot dog, it's your birthday." And I'm going to go ahead and stamp that down with some black ink. I'm going to give this a little bit of dimension by just adding some foam to the back, and then I'm going to pop this up on my camper. So I'm just going to line it up with the same die cut piece that's there on the camper. So you can see how that is popped up. And I also want to point out that the camper door will actually open. I didn't mention this earlier, but it does open. So if you wanted to, you can actually put something behind that camper door, or if you choose, you can just glue that door flat to your card front if you don't want it to open. So I'm just positioning my camper where I want it to go. I need to see how much space I need at the top of my card layer before I add this little hot dog stand. So I go ahead and add the hot dog stand to the back of the camper using some double-sided tape. I did die cut it out of some of the silver mirror cardstock as well as some of the other accent pieces on this camper. So you can see that the door handle, the bumper, the hitch, that's all out of the silver mirror cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and add glue to the back of the camper and add it to my card. I am going to glue the door flat to the card since I don't need it to open. After I add the camper to the card front, I'll go ahead and add the hot dog to the top. You want to make sure that you add your camper low enough so you still have room to add the hot dog to the top so that it does not extend beyond that card layer. This is going to be an A2 size card, so I do have less room to work with since it is a smaller card. I go ahead and add that entire layer to my A2 size card base, which measures 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And then I'm going to add some opal gems to the front of this card just to add a few, and that will complete my card. So there is the hot dog with the camper, and now I want to show you that you can actually use these dies without using the camper. So if you chose to make a card with just the hot dog and not the camper, you can totally do that. Here I'm going to make a donut card without the camper, but of course this donut can fit on the top of the camper as well if you wanted to use it in conjunction with the camper. So off camera, I just created several more donuts. I have some pink donuts and I have some teal donuts, and I am just adding them to a 5 by 7 card base. So I was able to fit a total of 12 donuts on a 5 by 7 card base. And once I have them all aligned where I want them, I'll go ahead and glue each one down to the front of the card base. I want you to notice that I did not put sprinkles on them yet. The only donut that has the sprinkles is the one that I created earlier, and that's the one at the top left-hand corner. Those sprinkles have already dried, so I'm able to touch that donut and put glue on the back. With the others, I didn't want to put sprinkles on them yet because I knew that I was going to have to glue them to the card front, and I didn't want the wet glue and the sprinkles to mess up. So I'm waiting until all of the donuts are glued to the card front before I add the sprinkles. I'm also going to add my sentiment before adding those sprinkles as well, and you'll see why in just a minute. So I go ahead and stamp out, "You give me a dozen reasons to smile," and I'm going to take a small rectangular die and die cut that out and add it to a piece of black cardstock that I also used a rectangular nesting die to die cut for the layer. I'm going to add the sentiment directly to the center of my 5x7 card front. If I added the sprinkles first, it would have been very difficult to add the sentiment on top of the sprinkles. So by adding the sentiment first, I'm able to see exactly where I need to put the sprinkles on the donuts that are surrounding it. So I'm going to go ahead and finish up these sprinkles off camera, but I just love how this card turned out. I think it is so adorable. So moving on to my next card, I'm going to make a card using the pizza. So I have a piece of black cardstock and I'm cutting some dies out of it. This is the Spellbinders Essential Circle dies. I'm going to layer a smaller circle on the front, and I also die cut and created another pizza off camera. I'm going to layer 2 pizzas inside the circle. I wanted this to look somewhat like a plate with pizza on top of it. So I'm going to go ahead and add one of the pizzas flat to the circle, and then I'm going to pop the second pizza up on foam. Next, I took the large die from the Spellbinders Essential Circles, and I die cut a piece of white cardstock to layer in the back of this large circle because, as you can see, there's holes along the edge of the black die cut circle, and I wanted the white to show underneath. Next, I'm going to work on the sentiment. So I'm going to do some embossing. I just added some powder to my black cardstock, and then I'm using my Versamark ink to stamp out the sentiment that says, "Here's a big slice of happy." I'm going to add some white embossing powder to the top, and I will shake that off, and then I will use my heat tool to heat set that sentiment. The pattern paper that I'm using for this card is from my stash. It's from an old paper pad that's not even in stock anymore, but I thought that this paper with the checkerboard pattern with that white and red, it looked like a tablecloth that you would normally find in a pizza restaurant. So I added the circle to the top of that pattern paper, and I cut down the sentiment to add to the bottom. Next, I'm going to take an A2 size card base, open it up, and I'm going to add a sentiment inside. My sentiment is going to say "Happy Birthday," so I'm just going to stamp that down. This sentiment is also from the Sweet and Savory Sentiment Clear Stamp. I'll go ahead and add that card layer to the front of my A2 size card base. And by the way, that pattern paper is measured at 4 by 5¼ inches. And then on the inside, I had some extra pepperoni pieces and olives left over, so I'm going to go ahead and just glue down some of the pepperonis, a green pepper, and some olives to the inside of that card. And that will complete this pizza card. So moving on, I'm going to use the ramen in a card. I am going to use an embossing folder to start with. I have the Spellbinders Essential Circles embossing folder. This is one of their brand new 3D embossing folders. And I'm going to be using my Spellbinders Universal Plate System to get a really good impression of this 3D embossing folder. And the white cardstock that I'm using here is 3½ inches by 2¼ inches. So I just cut it down small because that's what I'm going to have in the background of my ramen. But look at that beautiful beautiful 3D embossed background. I just love how that looks. I'm going to go ahead and stamp out a sentiment doing some heat embossing. This sentiment says, "Have a phenomenal birthday." So I'll go ahead and stamp that down onto my black cardstock with some Versamark ink. I'm going to add some white embossing powder to the top, and I will heat set that. I will trim down my sentiment. Now I'm ready to put my card together. So that embossed layer is going to go on a piece of black cardstock that measures 3 5/8 by 2 3/8. Then I have this pattern paper that's from the scrapbook.com Sherbet pattern paper pad. It's 5 1/8 by 3 7/8. That's going on some black cardstock that's 5 1/4 by 4. I go ahead and arrange my ramen and the chopsticks into the white area of that card panel, and I add the sentiment underneath. And that panel is going to go on an A2 size card base. That's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. And that's going to complete this card. For my next card, I'm going to use the Pretzel die, and I have a piece of white cardstock cut to 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm using the Origami Folds Spellbinders 3D embossing folder. I'm going to add this embossed background to a white A2 size card base. And this card is going to be a wedding card. It's going to be a cute wedding card because it has pretzels on it. So nothing fancy, just cutesy. And I have 2 pretzels that I die cut and inked up the edges to, and I'm going to glue them down to the front. I heat embossed with some white embossing powder the sentiment off camera, and this sentiment says, "Congrats on tying the knot," with knot spelled K-N-O-T. Next, I'm going to use this bow die. This is from the bow from the wreath from the camper die set. I die cut a piece of pink cardstock and a piece of black cardstock. So the pink bow is going to go on the top of the pretzel to represent a girl in the hair, and then the black bow is going to go on the bottom of the pretzel to represent the man with his tux. I think that's super cute. So just to add another extra special touch to this card, I want to just bring this in close. You can see all of the little holes in the pretzel that represent the salt on the pretzel. I'm going to go ahead and use my scrapbook.com pops of color in white, and I'm going to fill in all of those holes. This will make the holes a nice bright white, and it will also add dimension as well. So leave me a comment down below and let me know which card was your favorite. If you're interested in purchasing this collection, take a look at the links down in the description box below and on my blog. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And as always, if you want to see more card tutorials from me, be sure you click that subscribe button and turn on your bell notifications so that you'll be alerted every time I release a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.